What's up, everybody? Jim and Eric here to talk spoilers. Terminator Genisys is now out in theaters. Eric, you reviewed the film. It's up on the site. We've both seen it, obviously. So let's talk about spoilers from Terminator Genisys, where we can get into the nitty-gritty of what worked and what didn't, and the changes to existing canon. So, obviously, let's start with the big one right out of the gate. The changing of John Connor into a Terminator. Now, given away in a trailer, by the way.
Which is insane. I mean, watching it's funny because it's a tradition with this franchise. I mean, when I rewatch T2, it kind of always bugs me now that they gave away by the time it opened that he was a good Terminator, because you watch T2 and it's very built towards that moment in the hallway that he, oh my gosh, he's saving John. So now, what is it, 24 years later, they decided to ruin a big twist again. Although one that I think is almost even bigger and happens further into the film. Which is John becoming a Terminator. You know, I will say I saw it with my wife, who had not seen any of the trailers and was actually like, whoa, like that moment got her because she didn't know it was coming. And I've actually heard of a few other people who didn't know somehow. So
we found one.
So it's just a shame, I will say. You know, we'll talk about the aftermath of that and whether we felt they dealt with it well. But the actual reveal, I mean, it's certainly an interesting way to go, given John Connor's importance and you know, this Jesus-like figure,
JC,
JC, the Messiah almost, and that if he's now a bad guy and what it means. So the actual reveal is a cool reveal that was ruined by their own ad campaign, and I don't understand why they did that.
Well, you know, also the fact that they turn him into a bad guy, but within moments of seeing her son, she's like, there's no saving him. You know, just take him out. She has no actual, like, emotional feeling towards, like, this is my son, like, my son, the big hero of the future. She's like, well, he's gone. Let's get rid of him.
It was weird I think, you know, he should have been with them longer before the reveal, because it was interesting to have him show up.
Maybe try to save them at some point. Something,
right.
You know.
To have the three of them together is kind of cool, right? You know, it's like after all this time, it's like here's like these three heroes of the series, along with obviously most of the time Arnold, together was very cool. And I actually thought one of the better moments in the movie was Kyle finding out he's his dad. Since we've never dealt with that. It's always keep it a secret. Like even in Salvation, when he meets Kyle and he knows, it's like, oh, Kyle can't know. So that was kind of cool, and I thought, because I actually thought, you know, Jai Courtney and Jason Clarke had a nice rapport in the opening together, as far as like this friendship that, you know, John is means more than John, but he can't tell him why.
It's kind of like a big brother, little brother bond.
Except that it's not.
It's certainly not.
So I like that. You know, I liked Kyle finding out, but yeah, once the reveal happens, which again the trailer's ruined, you're right. It's way too quick a turn to we got to kill him, and no thought really about like it's our son. Oh my God,
our son. It's our son. It's the future humanity. She's automatically like the future has changed. He's gone. We got to get rid of him. And it's like you've spent the last 25 years of your life, or actually 20, because she looks like she's about 14 in the movie. You know, preparing for this. A little bit more shell shock as to what this means, and wait a minute, what are we going to do? And if we do go and kill him, what's the ripple effect for that? Like there's no sense of real consequence to the decision of like, well, he's got to go.
And also from his point of view, I was surprised by how unconflicted he seemed. If you're going to turn John Connor into a Terminator, I would assume you'd want to kind of go nuanced and maybe have him do the thing of like, I see it from a different perspective now, maybe trying to convince them or something. But he was pretty much
Whiplash,
just a bad guy at that point who had to be stopped. And that I thought was actually, that was even more surprising to me, was that I thought there'd be, even when the trailers revealed it, I thought, okay, so now you're going to have to deal with what that really means that he's a Terminator. And certainly this series has already delved into good Terminators enough that they could deal with that idea. I guess that was an echo to me of Salvation with Marcus. I guess that was Worthington's character, because that did deal with the like, oh, can we trust him? Can we not? But yeah, here it was pretty, nope, can't trust him, kill him.
Went right from the savior to the devil. And let's talk a little bit more about Cyberdyne and the rise of Skynet and the way that was kind of handled. You know, they get Courtney B. Vance, great actor, to be in the movie. I think he's in the movie 15 seconds and in like a wide shot.
Yeah, there was, and I said this in my review, and it's one of those things, by the way. My review is a 6.3, and I say I think there are fun elements to the movie, but I did know going into this, I'm like, that we're going to sound very negative because I think it's a movie that doesn't stand up to scrutiny, even though I do think it's not a terrible film when you're watching it.
Better than, I think it's better than Salvation.
Me too. But I think Courtney B. Vance, Miles Dyson being in the movie is one of the issues I have with the movie, which is, while there's certainly some cool, fun echoes and references to the first couple movies early on in this film, as it goes on, it's more and more fan service. And so, like, Miles Dyson being there is because someone was like, let's bring in Miles Dyson. Yeah. He's important to the franchise. What is he going to do? Nothing. Yeah. Like, he's going to show up for 2 seconds.
And the establishment of Skynet, I thought it was a little clever, a little cheeky that we do live in a time where they don't have to come in and force to take over your life technology. We invite it in,
Yeah.
And so that was a clever little nod to the times.
I thought that was a good too. I like that idea too. I did like, because again, it's an action movie. It's moving very quick, so you're not going to have a lot of time to deal with them being from Sarah being from 1984 now in 2017. But I did like the
What's an iPad?
Yeah, but I did like her being like, they're all they all have these devices. They're all staring at them. It actually was a clever idea that I almost felt the movie could have done more with.
Yeah.
But I did like that too. That if the evolution of everything and how would Skynet get into the systems, which, the more time goes on, the easier it would be, if everything's already connected.
Now, let's talk about, speaking of everything being connected, let's talk about some of the very overt and some of the more subtle nods to the existing films, starting with the entire sort of opening of the movie, at least once Kyle Reese gets sent back in time. It's kind of a shot-for-shot play out of the opening of Terminator.
Right. Look, it's hard not to enjoy that, if you're a fan, because it is that like, hey, they're doing this again, the truck driver, the punks, and then it has that little tweak on it. I was joking, although the lead punk, played by Bill Paxton in 1984, did not have his face tattoo, so somehow the timeline had changed so that guy never got a face tattoo. Now, look, that was enjoyable. Because it was playing, obviously, for Kyle, too, it's supposed to be like he's been prepared for one thing and then something else happens. Why is Sarah tough? Why is there a T-1000 there?
And he doesn't even know what a T-1000 is.
He doesn't know what a T-1000 is, right. So that was certainly fun. I mean, it was hard not to enjoy that. And yeah, look, you're even when you're kind of analyzing the effect, you can't help but not analyze like the young Arnold. It's still going to be fun to see old and young Arnold fight, although you were pointing out that it seems like they kind of undercut the original villain of the series.
I mean, look, in the original Terminator movie, he is just relentless, unstoppable. It takes a whole movie to take him out, to kill him. Right. A big, glorious exit at the end of that movie. Here, headshot. Yeah. And that's it. And it just, to me, it was like, yes, they've been preparing for this. You've got it up. But it just, to me, kind of undercut like the threat of the original Terminator, the original I'll be back Terminator. Right. And he lasted 5 minutes.
Right. I mean, I get it because that's supposed to be like, this is how.
But they dragged out the T-1000 for like half an hour.
Right. I guess it's supposed to be, this is how badass Sarah Connor is. But yeah, it is strange to take such, because look, let's face it, that's the only movie where we got Arnold as the villain, and some people would bemoan that that's the case. So it is a little sad to be like, yeah. they got rid of him.
What did you think that the T-1000 was well done? I thought there were a few too many echoes to the same bits that he did in T2.
I will say I really dug the T-1000, and it just kind of goes back to the concept, and obviously it's a revolutionary, T2 was a revolutionary film as far as effects and CGI and the use, and look, you think about how smart Cameron was to take this new technology and that specific character and what he can do. I mean, it was like ingenious. I know he'd already done the water tentacle in the Abyss. It kind of gave him the idea to go beyond that, but I enjoyed the T-1000 to a point that I wish he was in the movie more, because it's a cool villain. What he can do is cool. It's very cinematic. Of course, you're definitely right that this movie is not shying away from the, like, remember when that happened?
I mean, I did think that it got a little tired for me with he keeps getting headshot coming back. It's like, I get it. But the bullet, and you should get it too. The bullets aren't working. Try something else. That's why, when the method of his getting killed was pretty cool, and the fact that he's just like struggling there in the acid.
That was great. I actually thought that was a really cool moment. Yeah, like him trying to get to them, and Arnold holding his arm to stop him. And I thought I'm not gonna pronounce his name right probably, but Byung-Hun Lee from the G.I. Joe movies. I thought he had a good presence as that character.
I mean, I wanted to see. I guess I wanted to see a bit more use of that character than simply sort of callbacks to T2.
Right.
Although I have to say I hated the scene where it's like there are the two Kyles. Which one do I shoot? Which one do I shoot? Like that's such a cliche in any movie with a double. I hate that one.
It's even a cliche to the like she shot one of them and the jerky like how did you know it was me? And
I mean Kyle Reese, if his job is to protect Sarah Connor, wouldn't he say kill us both?
Right.
Be on the safe side. Like. Right. That's the guy. I mean, there was just so many little moments of missed opportunities, or just sort of like, just script issues throughout the entire thing. Let's talk about the just some of our overall issues with some of the performances. Emilia Clarke, I'm with you in your review. And I love her in Game of Thrones. But she's miscast here. Like she looks like she's 15, and she just doesn't have the grit of a T2 era Linda Hamilton.
I think she's great on Game of Thrones as well. And it's I could see people being like, hey, but she plays tough on Game of Thrones, but it's a different kind of tough, and
it's steely.
It's steely, yeah. And what they're asking her to embody here, it's so specific, and I think their bigger problem, and I mentioned this in my review too, is. Look, we live in an era where everything gets rebooted and recast, and we're going to see we are probably sooner or later going to get a new actor playing Indiana Jones, and that's just the way it goes. But what you got, of course, every time they get compared to what came before, but usually it's like, okay, but this is a reboot, new universe, new whatever. They can be tweaked. This James Bond is a little different. He's this. This movie was very specifically working with the original Terminator films. Yeah. Very specifically.
Right down to the photograph with the headband, right, and all that. Yeah.
So then it's much more of an onus for her to embody what we consider to be Sarah Connor.
Yeah.
And she just didn't. Especially because the whole idea is that she's been escalated to she's supposed to basically be T2 Sarah.
She's been fast-tracked. Fast-tracked,
exactly.
Yeah.
So she's supposed to be like 10 years earlier, she's a badass.
Yeah.
And Emilia Clarke wasn't right for that role, like what they
wanted.
Needed,
they needed somebody. You need somebody who looks like that they could get in a bar brawl.
Yeah.
And she just never. She looked like she was there to take your order. In the bar.
You said earlier she looked younger in this than she does in Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
She looked like a high school student, and it was she didn't have that gravitas for that specific character.
What about Jai Courtney as Kyle Reese? I find him generally pretty wooden.
Yeah,
but,
he is bland. It's a funny thing where I find myself in a strange defense of him, in that I don't want to be like, he's a great actor, everyone. I think he is bland. I think there's over hate for him. I don't think he's a terrible actor. I think that the movie most people first saw him in was the fifth Die Hard, which is an abysmal movie on every level. So I don't blame him for that.
But I still think he was one of the better things in that one.
But in this movie, he's bland. He doesn't have that sort of Kyle Reese almost PTSD.
Yeah, he needed to be haunted.
Right. He's just kind of a dude.
Yeah, he's a jock.
Yeah, so he wasn't bad, but he just was kind of there. Except I said, I thought there was a couple moments that worked for him, and they were the little stuff with him and John Connor in the beginning. Maybe because it's almost like, bro,
Yeah.
It's like we're
my dad, my bro.
We're buddies. But yeah, he also he even more specifically is supposed to be the Kyle Reese from the first movie, because he hasn't been changed, unlike her.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's like, no, it's not that guy. He just seems like a guy. He does not seem like this.
He's not carrying the weight of the world on him.
No, of what's
You've
happened.
been sent back in time to say he has this moment of like, this isn't right, but he needed to feel like this is a guy whose life was. He's like almost like a Walking Dead in a way.
Yeah.
Like your life was cut short as a child. You grew up in the apocalypse. Like you haven't known joy.
Yeah.
You're as much of a sort of automaton in your own way, at least emotionally. And he didn't get that. He really did just feel like a dude on like a summer trip or something. Like let's go see the sights.
Let's go surf.
Yeah. Now, Arnold, though, really is he is the anchor of this movie in so many ways, but he's also probably the best thing in there. What did you think of the kind of the stages of his Terminator? Because, and you know, that's also new that you can explain that he has been aging. You know, I thought that was a clever way. Of course, he's got actual human tissue; it's going to age.
I thought, you know, that worked for me. I mean, it is funny when you kind of think about how reverse engineered this movie was. Once they knew they had Arnold back, it's like how they were like, okay, well then we have to account for his aging. So I almost can see the script meetings where they had to account for like how that would all work. He's great. I mean, this is obviously a defining role of his career. He knows exactly what to do. He's still got it. He's still got that Arnold funny, awkward charm that specifically works so well for the Terminator because he's supposed to be a robot. Yeah. And so everything about his accent and his sort of halted delivery has always worked well for the Terminator. And you know, it's
That's damn it with faint praise.
Right. No, but it's like, you know, because he has presence and he has charisma, which are very important things. Like the Jai Courtney doesn't have, you know.
Yeah, he does kind of blow them all off the screen.
Yeah.
Except like when he and Jason Clarke have a few scenes, you can see like he's actually with a a real solid actor there.
Right.
You know?
And even though I didn't like his role, J.K. Simmons, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, Arnold, he's still great, and I do think. Yes, it's cheesy that she's calling a Terminator Pops, but as far as his character goes, it's pretty much a you know, going further what T2 already established. You know, this sort of this fatherly presence, actually caring for someone. It was building on the groundwork that was already there for what a good Terminator can be.
And also, you know, setting up bits of humor, but also, you know, acknowledging, even as a robot dealing with age, and he said it a few too many times, I'm old, not obsolete, which I think I'm going to make my new tagline. But, you know, just he has that moment with the shaking hand, which I actually thought was kind of interesting. Like, you know, even robots break down. What did you think though of the, you know, they give him the big, oh, Pops is gonna die, and then they bring him back, upgrade it with the T1. Like I didn't need that.
I didn't need that either. I mean, on one hand, I also guess I was thinking about it. I'm like, I guess I also didn't need to see a good Arnold Terminator die for the third time in this series. Yeah. But maybe they just never needed the fake out, right? You know, it's like, because it was the third time in this series that a new good Arnold
loses impact.
And gives everything, you know, and proves himself. Well, he's done it in part 2 and 3. I mean, we can talk more about the ending of the movie, but what's funny to me about the ending of the movie is we knew going in this is a planned trilogy, which
there are already release dates for
so was Salvation, so we'll see. But I was actually most surprised by how much of it was not set up for a sequel overtly. There's some other plot. Some unresolved plot issues we'll talk about in a second, but I was surprised by the end of the movie being very like, hey, we did it. Let's the three of us on the road.
You can totally see that they were like hedging their bets.
Right.
And we'll get to that mid-credits tag in a minute, but that's not exactly a vote of confidence in your franchise or the future of it, where you're like, well, we can wrap it up here in case people are like, oh, God.
That's what it felt like, right? It felt like that mid-credit scene is there to be like, oh, but we have something else. But if you don't watch the mid-credit scene, and some people don't because they leave, it's just a happy ending.
It didn't exist.
It's just Sarah, Kyle, and the Terminator are going to have some wacky adventures on the road.
There's your next TV series. Right. Actually, speaking of TV series, not to dial back all the way to the beginning, but you did notice we've talked about callbacks to T1, T2, even the other two movies.
I felt like the other two movies had, vague ones.
But the big TV callback that you caught.
I was wondering, I mean, again, was it purposeful or not? I'm a huge fan of the Sarah Connor Chronicles. I do think it's the best Terminator follow-up since the second one, when all the movies have had issues since. So I did think it was funny that when they time travel into 2017, Kyle and Sarah, and of course they're naked. You have to be in the Terminator movies, and they end up on a freeway naked, extremely similar to the pilot of Sarah Connor Chronicles, where John, Sarah, and Cameron, the Summer Glau Terminator, time travel to the future to 2007, 10 years earlier, and end up on a freeway, and there's like people like phone camera footage of them and stuff, and and so it felt very similar. I have no idea if it was purposeful echo or if just two different writers having a different idea, but as a big fan of that show, I'd like to believe it was purposeful.
You know, and that leads into J.K. Simmons. I did think it was clever that his character, that it paid off the cop at the beginning of the movie, who in the original movie, you know, it just gets killed, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, and so the fact that this kind of random patrolman actually becomes this main character in the latter half of the movie. However, you know, it's great. You have Oscar winner J.K. Simmons in there. But ultimately, what was sort of the point of his character? Just simply to be like, one person in the future believes you.
Yeah.
What did that add, though?
Again, it's a movie. I think I said this in my review. It's like it's a movie filled with idea. It's like I don't think they like didn't think of anything new, but they don't pay off a lot. And so that was I agree with you very much that when he comes back and you realize he was that cop from 1984, that's a fun idea, right?
Yeah.
But then he's not really consequential to what happens beyond that.
It's not like he leads them to Skynet. It's not like he's been, basically he's the guy who believes in aliens, if you will, although he knows they're robots from the future. But it's not like he has spent 30 years beyond just obsessing over it. It's not like he has been looking into like, well, the Skynet thing is, you know, or this Cyberdyne. I think that's how it begins.
Yeah.
You know, he's not obsessed enough to have actually followed through on any of his hunches, you know?
Yeah. And so, he's just kind of there, and it's great that it's J.K. Simmons, but I just felt like you could ultimately, it's a shame because you could take the character out and it won't change the story of the movie.
Yeah.
So he should have had more significance beyond
that.
Right.
Now let's talk about that mid-credits tag.
Yeah.
Okay, so they've kept Matt Smith, Doctor Who star Matt Smith's role. Mind you, billed as Matthew Smith in this movie. Apparently now he wants to be a serious
pulling a
actor.
Lawrence Larry Fishburne, are we, Matthew?
You know, he's top secret role.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to spoil that for you right here. Yeah. Who does he play, and why the hell was it kept secret?
He plays Skynet. He plays, like, for the first time, an embodiment of Skynet. I do not understand why they decided in their ad campaign, let's give away a giant twist about John Connor that happens halfway through the movie, and let's keep secret something that is revealed very early on. I mean, we're not told explicitly he's Skynet till a little later, but his first scene of the movie, he's a robot. He attacks John Connor, so he clearly is part of Skynet. He's a Terminator of some sort.
He's a bad guy right off the
So the fact that they didn't even want to reveal he's a bad guy from the future, it was so weird because you watch the movie and it's like, well, that's not important. It's not important.
And then you can't even really recognize him when he does come back as Skynet because, you know, he's growing up basically as a computer program. I mean, you can't tell that it's Matt Smith, really. He just looks like he looks like a sort of just blue Max Headroom to me.
Right.
You know? Also, the fact that, you know, it reminded me, oddly enough, of Resident Evil with the, what is it, the Red Queen, right? And they have like that computer program. That's what it felt like to me, you know?
Yeah, no, same here, when you had, especially when it was the creepy kid version.
Yeah. Ultimately, though, did that, making a sort of physical embodiment of Skynet, did that add anything? Especially when it was getting tired of the whole shooting the screen, he's back in front of us. Like, were you trying to play it for humor? It just seemed like it was stalling for time.
It's hard because, you know, that they were very vocal a year ago that, you know, he's in this movie, but he'll have a bigger role in the sequels. So it's like, okay, we want to do more with him in the sequels. But yeah, I felt like I would rather have gotten more into the psyche of what was happening with John than also have Skynet there as a villain. When it's just the two of them being bad guys, right?
Yeah.
We want to both kill humanity. They're both on the same page.
Yeah.
You know? So there was no nuance to those villains, and especially John Connor being so important to the story. I just felt like that could have been time better served getting into what was happening in John Connor's head now that he's a Terminator, rather than having this extra villain. And I mean, I can see the idea being interesting. Like, oh, what if we actually gave Skynet like a personality and a manifestation, but and then that mid-credit scene. I mean, you made a very funny reference when we were talking beforehand, before you were filming, about how it almost felt like I said it felt very old-fashioned, and you said it felt like the Master of the Universe movie.
Yeah, the tag at the end, or the end, like they have Franklin Jella Skeletor. It also reminded me a bit of the Green Lantern movie when suddenly Mark Strong becomes Sinestro, and you're like, and that'll never pay off, and that kind of, we understood where they're, you know, but it's just left field. If you're a regular viewer, you're like, the hell? Why?
It was very weird because like we said, the actual ending, cut to credits ending, is pretty much a happy ending.
Yep.
They did it, and then it's like this mid-credit scene that is just literally like, I'm still alive. And so it's there to give you this tiny kernel of like, oh, there could be another sequel. but it feels
it's like,
very.
what does
it feels
it
very
take to stop Skynet? It's so
Right.
ridiculous at this point. Like,
Yeah.
You basically you blew up their place. It sank. Like, what more does this goddamn thing need to stop it? Like, enough. I'm sick of it.
I know. Every movie is like, we're gonna stop this once and for all. You keep failing. But yeah, that tease just kind of felt half-hearted. You know,
Yeah.
it's like, oh, there he is. We should talk though about the in general the unanswered questions of this movie, though.
Yeah, there are. Well, my biggest question is, will it spawn some sort of Three's Company style sitcom of like, it's, you know, the two of them and their robot roommate. What are you gonna
sharing
do?
space with the Terminator.
Okay, biggest unanswered questions in this movie. Essentially, who sent back old Arnold? Well, he wouldn't have been old then, but to save Sarah Connor as a little kid.
Yeah.
That is just a huge WTF. I have no idea still.
Yeah.
And hey, I guess they'll explain it in the sequels that I don't think we're ever going to get, but
yeah, that's the big one to me is that they kind of just what's the thing is the problem is that no one in the movie seems that concerned with that either, right? It's just like, oh, a Terminator came back to save me when I was 9. But who sent it?
But again, like, why go back to when she's 9? Why not go after her parents?
Right,
like,
right.
I don't get the arbitrary nature of just picking dates in this movie, you know?
Maybe the Terminators just like to flip through.
It's like, well, there was a sale that week in 1984, so that's why I went back.
Yeah, so it's a weird thing where I was like, okay, you left this as a big unanswered question, like if the future changed, like what's going on, but yeah, the way it was presented almost felt to me like they're like, oh, and we'll figure it out. Like I didn't feel confidence they had an answer to that question. I just felt like they were like, we'll figure that out.
And there's this sort of fake tension of like, you know, you can't trust, even though he's raised you since childhood, you know, he can turn on you. And I think they're trying to play up that tension and that dread, especially in the hospital underground scene where he, you know, shoots through the teddy bear to get John. When we all know that, especially when they ruin it in the ad, but like we all know that he's not going to play a bad Terminator again.
And T3, you know, did do the scene at the end where he got messed up and he reverted to his original programming and was trying to kill John. So it's like we already did that, you know, in another movie. So, and that's the problem is like, you know, quite literally in this movie because they're going back into previous events, but it's like it's becoming this just never-ending loop of these 3 or 4 characters just repeating things over and over again.
And I'm so done, period, with the story of John Connor. I feel like they at this point, I felt like they almost acknowledged that there was nothing else for them to do with that character. So let's just make him a bad guy.
Right.
And any other major unanswered questions from this movie?
No, I mean it's all sort of the murkiness of the future because. You know, obviously, I think that the big changing moment is supposed to be Skynet attacking John. I mean, I guess the inference there is that that didn't happen the original time. So then you're like, okay, who I guess then Skynet just decided once again, let's try another Terminator to send back to 1973, and then we don't know who sent.
But then there's also all the stuff with Kyle Reese as a little kid, and sort of meeting Sarah Connor, and that was. Oh, a little creepy.
Yeah.
You know, it's like you know, and the whole thing with the hand, like, wait, so you're just telling him one thing about how to get from A to B. It's not like she was really telling him anything else that he needed to know.
I mean, I understood that it's more supposed to be the symbolic nature of like.
One day you will sperminate me.
Of that, yeah.
And in that moment, that boy became a man.
You're gonna get with this.
That's looming. So yeah, I just felt like they didn't know kind of what to do either with Kyle's kind of memory timeline too. Like he goes back in time, now he has memories he doesn't realize, and then so they have Arnold doing I like the way you put it as an info dump of like all the exposition, and it felt a little fumbled in how they were trying to handle that.
Yeah, I mean at least one of the movie's better moments of humor is Kyle kind of being the audience and being like, I don't know what you're talking about. But I think that was a clever way to kind of acknowledge the fact that they were having Arnold just explain all this insanity of the different timelines. Yeah.
Well, I mean, there's probably a lot more we could talk about with the issues of what didn't work and what did work with the movie. We want to know, though, what you thought of Terminator Genisys. Let us know in the comments below. I guess feel free to talk about spoilers since this is a spoiler cast.
Indeed.
So, for all things movies, keep it here on IGN.